Afternoon, good morning, good evening for all the participants from wherever you are joining all over the world. Welcome on board to this webinar on capacities, climate resilient cities, action planning and implementation lessons. My name is Imani Kumar. I'm the Deputy Secretary General with ICLEI, ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, and also the Regional Director with ICLEI South Asia. Today's event focuses on showcasing the efforts of National Government of India and also the cities in India and other parts of the world on climate action through their bold and daring initiatives. We will also talk about the policy action, also the planning and city-led actions on ground in this particular session. I'm so happy that we have senior representatives from the national government, Government of India, and also local level CEOs, commissioners joined in this particular session. We also have my colleague and my partner, Mr. Hans-Peter, who also joined in this session. We are honored to have with us today with other speakers. I just want to name them. We have Dr. Jonathan Demash. He is the Head of Cooperation from the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And Mr. Kunal Kumar sir is the Joint Secretary and the Mission Director for the Smart Cities, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. We have Mr. R. Srinivas from Town and Country Planning, Government of India. And we also have Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, who is joining us from the Director National Institutes. And we have Ms. Sakshi Chedda Dasgupta, Senior Thematic Advisor from Swiss Development Corporation. I'm also happy to introduce, we have the Municipal Commissioner, the CEO for the international participants for the city of Rajkot, Mr. Udit Agarwal, and also from Mr. Chaudhary from the Udaipur city. And we also have the CEO in charge for the Nagpur Smart Cities Limited, Mr. Mahesh Morani. I would also like to welcome all other participants today and my colleague, Ms. Soumya Chaturvedila, who will also join us in this session on that. Today's session agenda, we will have Mr. Jonathan, who will give the introductory keynote address. And then we have two panel discussions focusing on the climate resilient cities. The first panel discussion will be moderated by Ms. Sakshi, and which will have, we will have the national perspective from Mr. Kunal Kumar sir, and also from Mr. Srinivas, and Mr. Hans-Peter will talk about how the project will taking forward those actions on that. And then we have question and answers. And then the second panel goes on with Mr. Udit Agarwal, Mr. Chaudhary, and Ms. Soumya on that. We also have question and answer sessions depending on the time availability, and we will take it forward. Before I ask Mr. Jonathan, I just want to put the housekeeping rules. For all of you, to just let you know that this session is going to be recorded and will be made public on the Daring Cities website. And as already I said that if you want to ask any question to any speakers, please use Q&A box. We will answer, the panelists will answer those questions. If we can't answer during the session, we will come back to your questions on that. If you are having any technical difficulties, please send a message via chat box, so you can select whether to send a message to all participants or only to the participants on that. For the best webinar experience, we request all of you to avoid multitasking. Please close all non-essential applications on your device, particularly the messaging apps such as Skype and other things like that. Without wasting any time, I request Dr. Jonathan to give us the keynote speech today. Just to introduce Dr. Jonathan holds a PhD, doctorate from Institute of Development Studies in the political ecology. He has worked for the Netherlands Development Organization, the Overseas Development Institute, and also various NGOs. and as a researcher in Nepal, India, Tajikistan, Ethiopia, and West Africa. So welcome on board, all of you. Mr. Jonathan, the floor is yours, please.
Mr. Emani Kumar, thank you very much. Honorable Joint Secretary, Deputy Secretary General, Director of NIUA, distinguished guests, participants, speakers, friends, and colleagues. It's an honor to be here with you today. This week, I've been through a fascinating experience. Moving from a 1,500 inhabitants carefree village surrounded by glaciers in the middle of the Alps to one of the biggest megalopolis in the world, in a city that I love, New Delhi, with its 20 million inhabitants. Mountains, snow, and pine trees are gone, replaced by tall concrete buildings, mango trees, honking, and streets vibrant with people life, culture, and history. Yet both are confronted to the challenge of building resilience, becoming resilient cities, a concept introduced by ICLEI 11 years ago. Different challenges, but one same big question. How do we respond to present challenges, and how do we prepare for the future? And this image, the small village in the big city, is somehow representative of Switzerland in India. Switzerland has more than 60 years of experience of cooperation in India. But why is tiny Switzerland present and still working in India, the fifth biggest economy in the world? Yes, contexts are different, but both countries are affected by climate change and need to respond to this common challenge and to adapt. And both countries need to develop in a way that is compatible with the boundaries of our natural environments. And since no country has managed to achieve this so far, I think it is fair to say that we are all developing. We are all bound by a common challenge and a common interest, and therefore cooperation is required. And this is why the Global Programme on Climate Change and Environment of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation is active in India. The Global Programme on Climate Change and Environment has three main working principles in its engagement in India, which are important today. First, we align with India's policies and commitments. We work together with Indian authorities, with the central government, but also importantly with states and city governments, with non-state partners such as foundations and research institutions. And India and Switzerland are both federal decentralized states with a large degree of autonomy and competencies at the local level. And this has advantages because decision-making and implementation are closer to the citizen. So the local is where change happens, and this is where change will happen. And for this reason, the work of ICLEI is fundamental. Second, we focus on fields of intervention where Switzerland can bring specific expertise and innovative technologies, but always in a spirit of cooperation. And third, we want to have a global impact. We want to create concrete interventions, scale up, disseminate at the national and regional and global level through global institutions, through the elevators approach. And once again, the work of ICLEI and conferences such as Daring Cities are so important to share and bring concrete experiences and tools to the next level. And with respect to this, it's heartening to note that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is encouraging cities to adopt climate resilient development paradigms. Our work supports cities in this transition and in responding to national commitments as enshrined in the country's nationally determined contribution. Rajkot and Udaipur will show us how they have developed, ratified, allocated funds within their municipal budget and implemented their climate action plans. So the GPCC, the Global Programme for Climate Change and Environment, has two main priorities in India. First, promote low emission development. And second, promote climate resilient development and sustainable resource management. In the field of low emission development, I would like to give only a few examples. We know that 40% of global carbon dioxide emissions come from constructing, heating, cooling, and demolishing buildings. And therefore, SDC is active in this field. Cement itself is responsible for 8% of global CO2 emissions. And with the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, but also with IIT Delhi, IIT Madras, Technology in Action for Rural Development, we are supporting the research, development, and commercialization of low carbon cement, which can lead to up to 30% of CO2 emission reduction. And low carbon cement is also more resource efficient and cheaper to produce. And it's already commercialized in Latin America, and we're expecting standardization in India soon. SDC is also active in the field of energy efficiency in buildings. So with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency of the Ministry of Power, SDC has supported the development of Ekoniwa Samhita, the first energy conservation building code for residential buildings. It is now applied to the affordable housing scheme. The state of Andhra Pradesh has already adopted it, and 3 million housing units are being built, and we expect other states and cities to follow. The Building Energy Efficiency Project, or BIP, is active in all climatic zones of India, from Ladakh to Kanyakumari. And we are also working on the inclusion of innovative renewable energies in buildings. And we also work on clean air, another global emergency responsible for 8 million premature deaths worldwide every year. And through the Clean Air Project, we work on improving data measurements, enhancing capacities of cities and state authorities, and raising awareness. Now, in the field of climate resilient development, SDC works on the use of on the use and impact of solar irrigation in 4 countries in South Asia, on the integration of remote sensing technologies and insurance to increase the resilience of farmers. And in Indian Himalayan regions, we also work on early warning systems and on the integration of climate actions into national and subnational planning and implementation. But one of our flagship projects that works on both climate change mitigation and climate resilience is CapaCITIES, implemented with the National Institute of Urban Affairs, South Pole Carbon Management, eConcept, and ICLEI South Asia. The project is going to be active in 8 partner cities in 2 states of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. And 2 of these cities are with us today, Udaipur and Rajkot, as well as our partners. And we are looking forward to hearing them today. And I will not go into much details. 2 remarks though, that CapaCITIES has attempted to test and demonstrate urban planning approaches to enhance resilience. And we welcome the ongoing initiatives, including those undertaken by the Town and Country Planning Organization under MOUA at the national level to integrate climate resilient aspects into urban planning guidelines. And second, the several tools and methodologies for planning and implementing climate action have been developed through the CapaCITIES project. These climate resilient cities action plans, which were prepared and tested in phase 1 of the project, are built on the European Energy Awards implemented by over 1,600 cities in Europe. Climate resilient cities action plans can be an essential tool to institutionalize planning processes in a climate smart cities assessment. So our objective is that all smart cities do adopt a methodological approach for preparing climate action plans. So we are here to recognize and empower courageous urban leaders around the world to tackle the climate change. And we had several examples already. And it's important, as the UN Secretary General reminded us in the opening, to bring these lessons and commitments to COP26 next year. And we had a lot of examples from the Mayor of Bonn and others. So the right decision needs to be made now using technologies that we have, and not technologies of the past, nor technologies that we don't have. And it seems we are moving in the right direction, gaining speed and momentum. But I think I've talked enough, and now I'd like to leave the floor to the daring leaders and achievers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jonathan, for informing us how the SDC Swiss government is really helping, supporting the cities all over the world and also the cities in India. Thank you. Thank you for your opening remarks. May I now ask Ms. Sakshi Chadda-Dasgupta to take over, and I request Mr. Kunal Kumar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Urban Affairs, Mr. Srinivas and Mr. Hans Peter to please switch on your cameras, and Sakshi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kumar. Mr. Kumar. It's been absolute pleasure to participate in this important event. Important especially in the context that we exist today globally, both in terms of climate change and the trying times of COVID that we've seen, how we are intrinsically linked globally, and how from a pandemic to climate change, we are experiencing its impacts right from the smallest of village to the biggest of cities. So this is an important conversation in that regard. So I think the panel is also divided in a way that we start with the top and then we trickle down to the cities where they present their views. We are very privileged to have with us Mr. Kunal Kumar, who needs little introduction, and Mr. Srinivas and Mr. Hans Peter. I'll briefly introduce the panel before I request Mr. Kumar to give his introductory remarks. Mr. Kumar is from the Indian Administrative Services. He's right now working as a Joint Secretary and Mission Director for the Smart Cities Mission for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. Shri Kumar is synonymous for us working in the urban development space with the climate smart cities, the smart cities mission. And he's been really working very, very closely with the Prime Minister's broader vision on how to make Indian cities smart and sustainable and climate responsive. He has a very unique experience in terms of right now he's working with the central government, but also he's worked as the commissioner for Pune city. Therefore, he understands and knows the city perspective quite well. He is also an electrical engineer from IIT Roorkee, and he has done his master's in public management from National University of Singapore. He's been awarded by the Prime Minister a few times, and his work has been recognized all over the country. And we see him taking very, very innovative steps in the ministry, right, from the data observatory to data management. So thank you, Mr. Kumar, for taking out time for our event. Second on the panel is Mr. Srinivas, who's he's a town and country planner from the very important institute in India called Town and Country Planning Organization, which is also part of Government of India. Mr. R. Srinivas has been working with the TCPO, as it is called in short, since 1991, and has been heading the Metropolitan and Union Territories Division at TCPO. He has been instrumental in working on several guidelines, norms for the preparation of urban regional development and plan formulation guidelines. In 2014, model building bylaws, which serve as guidance to the states and the cities. He's represented TCPO at various committees and panels in Government of India. So he's very instrumental in bringing on codes, standards, and guidelines which really direct the way on how the cities move forward on urban development and building construction. He has been actively involved with the Indian Town Planners Institute, the School of Planning, and has, to his credit, more than 30 publications. And also presently, he's the director in board of the Smart Cities Ahmedabad Limited. Moving on, we have with us a very reputed international expert, Mr. Hans Peter, who also works as a team leader for the CapaCITIES project supported by the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation. But in his own right, Mr. Hans Peter has over 25 years of experience in international cooperation in areas of climate resilient infrastructure, trade, and cleaner production. Sustainable technology, and more importantly, on private investment related to social and environment issues. He's worked with various organizations, be it the World Bank, regional development banks, UN organizations, and he's really had very, very concrete experience on management of innovative projects related to interface between economy, environment, and development cooperation. He has been really instrumental in collaboration with international projects for financing on sustainable infrastructure, and responsible for financing agreements of projects with the Swiss bilateral finance scheme, as well as establishment of green credit. We take his knowledge on finance, and we would like him to speak more on that. But coming back to Mr. Kumar, Joint Secretary, Smart Cities Mission. Sir, we would, you have been really in the, so to say, center of all the urban development discussion, deliberation, action, implementation, talks with the cities, with the ministry, really the key link between the national and the state and the city governments. So it's, we would be very happy to request you to give your introductory remarks, just to also have an eye on the clock. We would request, sir, if you could speak for 10 minutes, and then we would move on to the panel discussion and have introductory remarks from the other speakers as well. So I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Kumar.
Thank you, Sakshi. The introduction was fairly long. It seemed as if I'm here for a job interview. But thank you and welcome everyone on this discussion, the panelists, esteemed participants, everyone joining from across the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this world. I'm just reminded, a couple of days before, my son was doing a project on climate for school, and he asked me a question. He said, we always have plan A, plan B, plan C, but do we have a planet B? And it was a stark question. It's a question which makes you think. You don't think like that, but we don't really have a planet B. People do talk about planet B's being thought about, and therefore, sometimes these kinds of observations really bring it very starkly before you as to the kind of issue we are talking about. And climate has always been a slippery issue. We know that there are trade-offs, and these trade-offs are not easily acceptable sometimes. And therefore, it's a very difficult issue to make climate come on the front burner of a lot of the things that we want to do and we are doing. And so at this background, again, the trade-off is that we're probably going to see a wave of urbanization going forward. I think over the next 2 decades, India and Africa are going to be 90% contributors to the overall urbanization that the world will see over the next 2 decades. And I think India, followed by Nigeria and other cities and other countries in the African continent. And so how this urbanization happens is not only important for these countries, but it's actually important for the entire globe. Because if we take the energy intensive way of development that some of the countries have taken, I think we will actually come to a stage of really looking out for a planet B, because we just cannot survive. So this is a very important moment in the history of the world. Countries like as big as India are on the cusp of rapid urbanization going forward, and therefore climate needs to be given utmost attention in all this, as we go about doing our urban initiatives and urban thinking. Having said that, urbanization itself is, something that we need to have a clear understanding about. And I think most of the literature on how urbanization should happen and what could be the possible ways of doing things in cities comes from the West. And in fact, it comes from the weird countries, which is WERD, which is Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Now, well, you may fall into some of those brackets, but not all the brackets. And therefore, I think it's very important. And agencies and global think tanks and organizations who are really concerned about the future of climate need to have contextual research on countries like India, South Asia, Africa, as to how urban development should happen in these countries, which will not go the way that things have gone in the past, because clearly that's not tenable in the future. We ourselves are looking extensively into building that practice, and therefore we're making small beginnings here and there. For example, the setting up of the Center for Climate for Cities, which is C-Cube within NIUA, is one step to build an organization which will take up extensive research on how we work on climate issues and how we work on overall urban development with the lens of climate going forward. So that's one where I think a lot of commitment and support and collaboration with the world would be needed. Then, of course, another umbrella that we have created is the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, where at the national level, we created a framework sort of where cities can compare with each other and learn from each other, learn from cities outside, and build a climate practice. So we actually need to innovate. Governance structures are very different. We don't have a mayoral system. We don't have a city manager system. It's somewhere in between. And therefore, within what is, you can't keep debating and cribbing about what is not. Within what is, how do you innovate and place climate at a very important place in this entire structure is very important. So how do you innovate on climate governance models? Some of these cities will talk about it. I'm waiting to hear from some of the cities today as to what they have been doing. Then we need to develop internal capacity. We need to develop a practice and professionals who look at climate issues within our country. We need to have internal capacity enhancement. Then we need to look at many other ways of funding and building, climate innovative solutions in cities. So one of the examples is we are almost, in fact, we just got approval from the government of India to launch a 200 million euro challenge fund on climate, which is with the AFD and the KfW banks of Germany and France. And very soon we will be coming out with it. We've already done one version of what we call the CITIES program with AFD, where 12 projects across the country have been funded on a challenge, but that was for different kinds of things. It was mobility and public space development and all. This new tranche of 200 million euros is focused on funding climate. And we're trying to build outcome-based funding so that cities which actually show remarkable improvement in climate outcomes get more funding. It should not be project-based funding, which really cannot be actually accountable to outcomes. Sakshi, please let me know brutally at any point of time. You need to tell me about time, okay? Yeah, so those are things, and there is another thing I want to talk about, is this concept of the Climate Smart Cities Alliance. We understand that in a country like ours, it's just not possible for the government or the city leadership themselves, or even for that matter, any other sector of the industry to do it themselves. Yes, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, but if you only look at the industry part of it, we'll not really come to the right solutions. We need to work on collaborative ways of building capacity all around. We need to build education curriculum which focus on this. So we need to work with academic institutions to inform appropriate curricula in those institutions of how students should be, made aware of what is to be done in the future and what could be our climate future and their role, potential role in this, all this. How do we work with industry to build the right, knowledge? And how do we work with city governments? This entire thing about climate is not only about energy efficient street lights and better mobility and better air quality. Yes, it's all about that, but it's even much bigger than that. For example, we hardly associate, and good that we have Srinivas ji on the call, we hardly associate urban planning with climate, but it's at the heart of climate. If you have mixed use, condensed, dense habitations, you actually do a lot of benefit to climate. But that's part of urban planning. It's not something which is directly linked. Then how do we affect lifestyles? There is something called minimalism, which has taken over some parts of the West, some people. It's not about minimalism or extravagance. It's about something in between where you are conscious of what you are doing in the ways that you're affecting climate. How do you build that practice in cities? How do you build participatory governance? Easier said than done, even for democracies like India. But in a heterogeneous community like ours, how do you take everyone into account and into confidence? Only then you build a sustainable practice on climate. Otherwise, it's all over the place. And it's all, mudslinging, this one is doing this, why should I do this, and so on and so forth. So you have to take everyone along. Then placemaking, something that we don't associate with climate, but I think, placemaking, the way we can turn around our cities on walkability, the way we can turn around our cities on cycling, on public space development, on nurturing neighborhoods, creating spaces which people like. You don't need to take out vehicles all the time. You don't need to be in cars. So can we create something like that? Can we create, a prominent place for nature in and around our cities? By no means I'm saying you need to build big parks and all. So maybe Sakshi
may I
said,
just,
yeah,
another 1 or 2 minutes, sir?
Done. I'm closing. So these are just, certain ideas I thought very important for us to discuss and take forward. Of course, a lot is happening, and I don't want to kind of go into the depth of what's happening. The one message I have probably for this conference, and I would like to be associated when contributing towards, is partnership. And I think in the sum of parts has to be greater than the whole has to be greater than the sum of the parts. And so let's work together. And I think anyone interested in climate in the moment in the world has to be working with India. in some way or the other, because it's not only going to affect India, it's going to affect the world. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I mean, we could have asked for a better introductory uh, remarks or remarks on climate change. I think you summed it up wonderfully. And while you accounted for things and steps that the ministry is doing, but you also touched upon the broader understanding or the broader vision on climate that we all need to adopt, and not merely in the terms of infrastructure alone. You also touched upon, importantly, about the planning aspects, which is where the game starts. And really, it really decides on which direction and how smoothly we'll have our journey on urban development, which rightly takes us to the next panelist, Mr. Srinivas, who's a town and country planner. And he would probably want to build on what Mr. Kumar said, and maybe we come back to Mr. Kumar for some questions. I understand sir would have to leave by 5. He has another meeting. So if there are any questions directed to Mr. Kumar, we would request the participants to share that in the Q&A box, and we will address it to Mr. Kumar. But we now move on to Mr. Srinivas, who can give us a broad understanding on how this important organization, which is really the one who sets the agenda for planning in the country, looks at this entire important issue. So Mr. Kumar, Mr. Srinivas, you would have 3 to 4 minutes to make your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Mr. Srinivas, your mic is
Yeah.
muted.
Thank you, Sakshi, and distinguished speakers, participants. I would, at the outset, I would like to thank Clay for giving me the opportunity to make a brief presentation. I will just highlight the efforts of Town and Country Planning Organization, which is a technical arm to Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, what we have done towards climate resilience. Quickly, we have brought 2 very important, documents. One is Urban and Regional Development Plan Formulation and Implementation Guidelines that was brought out in 2015, which focuses on climate resilience. The URD5 guidelines are basically meant for the state governments, the provincial governments who are actually preparing the master plans and development plans, local area plans, zonal development plans for their respective cities. So we have sustainability guidelines, we have climate mitigation and adaptation through green building, climate proofing, city biodiversity index. Next, please, quickly. Then we have, environmental guidelines that how the industries can be located, what are the, clearances required for setting up the industries. Then we have a very important, rainwater harvesting, which is a very important component for, we can say, India, there is a report that which says, Niti Aayog reports that majority of the million-plus cities will run out of the, water. So in the model building bylaws, this is one URDF guidance, that is guidance for the state government to prepare master plan. Model building bylaws 2016, this is also a guide for all the state government to amend their respective building bylaws. So chapter 9 exclusively, mentions about rainwater harvesting, and chapter 10, which is the most important, which mentions about green building and sustainability provisions. Now, let me tell you that most of the state government have adopted these building bylaws. And of course, we have provision for sanction of building plan approvals. Now out of 8,000 cities, 2,700 cities have migrated to online building plan approval system. And of course, we also have guidelines for green rating of buildings, best practices in sustainable environment management for building construction. Quickly, next, please. Yeah, so, some of the case studies which we have mentioned in URDF guidelines. One of the case studies is climate proofing Guwahati city resilience strategy and mainstreaming plan, which is which is a study done by Terry, and based on the sectoral analysis, recommendations have been provided for each sector, which has been focused on ecologically sensitive urban planning, management, conservation of natural resources, and efficient and eco-friendly urban infrastructure and services. Next, please. Now, what are the challenges ahead? We have total number of cities and towns 7,933, out of which 4,041 are statutory towns. And we have around 32% of urbanization, and we are very much curious to know when our census is going to start. Census 2021 preparation will be most probably, because of COVID situation, it is going to start in 2021, and we are likely to achieve 36% of urbanization by 2021. Total number of statutory master plan, kindly see, this is very much important figures. Out of 7,933 cities, we have 2,771 towns actually having the statutory master plans. The total number of town planners available, 6,000. I mean, it works out to one planner per 63,000 urban population. The international norm is that one town planner must be available for 12,000 urban population. So these are the challenges, and moreover, we have to sensitize the town planners of all the provincial governments, I mean, union territories.
Srinivas, if I interrupt, you would have 1 minute. Yeah.
It is last. The next is the last slide. Next, please.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Now, way forward, what we are gearing, I mean, especially with the help of ministry, we are gearing towards sensitizing the town planners towards mainstreaming both climate and disaster resilience in master plan, zonal development plan, local area plan. We are going ahead with the GIS based master plan for 500 cities, where for more than 100,000 population, I mean 500 cities we have got. We are also streamlining the building plan approvals, as 2,100 cities and towns have migrated to OBPS, online building permission system, ensuring climate resilience through certification. And of course, we are also envisaging incentivizing the builders owners for adopting the green building. I mean, the challenges are a lot of challenges are there, but we are totally gearing up towards achieving these the 4 objectives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. I'm sorry we had to hurry you up, but I think it was really good that you could touch upon and give us a good summary of these model building bylaws. We are happy to see that you climate change figures in it, and not just mere mention, but emphatically integrated into different aspects of it as well. And you importantly talked about the sensitization as well as mainstreaming of climate change. Very important words, especially when we go down to the smallest of cities in the most distant part of the country. How do they start thinking about climate change and disaster resilience in a planning, in the context of planning? Moving on, I will take you from Delhi, nice cold day in Switzerland, to Mr. Hans-Peter. I had introduced him as a team leader for the CapaCITIES project, but in his own he has far greater experience on finance, on international environment and economy. How do they correlate? And so, Mr. Hans-Peter, exactly 4 minutes for you to touch upon some of these aspects, and what are the things that we could see that's happening in Switzerland, and take a better view of it. Mr. Hans-Peter, do you hear me?
Thank you very much, Sakshi, and also thank you very much to the speakers on the panel before. Hello, everybody. Yes, indeed. Also, we are suffering here. Overall, world over climate change is a real risk. Increasing storms, heat waves, droughts, and floods are impacting the economic system and will impact even more. As per McKinsey Global Institute, for instance, such events can impact drastically our annual GDPs, and particularly in India, they are counting up to 4.5% of impact to the GDP. These issues are quite serious, and particularly in a country like India that is struggling already to lift millions out of poverty. So we have here the connection between climate change and poverty solutions. The good news, however, is that there are solutions available today. And we have heard approaches, solutions already that are applied in India. Clean power, low carbon transport, energy efficient buildings, as just been mentioned by Mr. Srinivas, and climate smart agriculture, energy efficient buildings, all know-how is there and is already applied. But, and this is very important, these are all areas where we can create clean, healthy, and safe jobs, leading to the way to a more greener future. And I think this is a very important message here, talking about climate change mitigation, talking about greener financing, talking about innovative solutions is not just more expensive. Often it's not more expensive because it provides more efficient solutions, so more efficient investments. And in addition to that, it's offering jobs. It's needed jobs for ever-growing population. And I think that's a very important positive element when dealing with climate financing and with greener investments. Green finance flows are taking place already. In India, we count about 17 billion already in 2017. And in 2018, this figure has increased to 21 billion US dollars, which have been invested in green projects. To break this up, 85% from domestic sources and 15 already from international sources. We see here the clear climate financing has also a partnership aspect. So public and international financing. And out of the domestic, 85%, 56 are from private sources and 29 are from the public. So it's not the public, the leader in this anymore. It's financing sources which are so important for the changing of this whole investment approach. And again, we are talking about a partnership between private and public sector. And when assessing the international part, there we can also see that out of this 15%, 10% are from public funds and 5% are from the private. Again, we see this given the fact that there is a lot of liquidity in the international markets, which is shown to an interest rate which is so deep as ever before. So that shows that there is international liquidity, and the international liquidity could tap on infrastructure investments, provided the conditions are okay, provided that the risks are manageable. So there is a clear potential to increase international private sector resources to be pumped into sustainable infrastructure, and particularly in India, which is a solid market and a growing market, and which is an interesting market. So the loans, the instruments used for financing are loans, equity, and grants, and 80% so far.
Hans-Peter,
yes?
I would just interrupt that probably a minute to go, probably to close your remarks.
Yes, 80% of these flows are going to the power sector so far, but we definitely hope that we are able, with innovative financing structures, to also provide appetite for other green investments.
Thank you, Mr. Hans-Peter. That was really very useful remarks, especially the kind of context that you provided, sharing these very interesting numbers and giving that I mean, there is a growing, growing interest and opening up of the green finance area, which is really, I mean, the backbone for any climate action. So this is very interesting. I understand that Mr. Kunal Kumar had to just leave before 5 for some other urgent work that came up. But we have a few questions coming up. To Mr. Srinivas, so you have been working in TCPO and working on these planning norms, guidelines, and working extensively with the state cities. There has been a marked change in the way cities are now developing and how they read or understand building bylaws, for example. There is also a very important role that data plays now in how we plan, how we manage. The ministry is, I wanted to ask this question to Mr. Kumar, but unfortunately he's not there. But I would like to ask you, since you work closely with the ministry, but how does this, the great interest that the government and this great initiative that the government has taken on data management, there are special programs. How does that impact the urban planning process, both in terms of backward and forward linkages, what comes from the cities and how what we give back to the cities in terms of building bylaws?
Very valid question. In fact, if you go through the URDP guidelines, I mean, most of the state town planning departments, urban development authorities, municipal corporations, they are very well aware of the guidelines and what are the data sets. You know, it's clearly mentioned in the URDP guidelines, and moreover, we also have, standard designs for preparing GIS-based master plan. So it has got the detailed data set. Now, 500 Amrit cities, they are in process of preparing the geo database in collaboration with National Remote Sensing Center. So the collection of database that has been standardized, both attribute as well as spatial data. I mean, you have to extract the information through satellite images. I mean, with the 0.1 or 0.5 centimeter resolution. So the database has been standardized, but now, I mean, thanks to COVID, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, due to the COVID, you have a lot of real-time data information. I mean, in fact, you can see in the daily newspaper, you will see so much of infographics, so much of data is being flowed. So now cities are actually gearing up to get data through command and control center, integrated command and control center, which will actually collect the data. I mean, the real-time data information. I mean, we are absolutely optimistic that our plan making process will see a lot of qualitative and quantitative, both changes will be there. And hopefully now you see in the past 5 years, there has been, large number of cities have prepared their master plan, they have notified. And up to 2025, our target is that we need to have master plan for each and every city and town. That's what we are actually advising the state governments. And it's not that, see, for smaller states like hill states, northeastern states, there, when even the analog data is also not available, so it takes time. We have to convince them, we have to guide them, and especially now you will be very glad to know that our northeast states, all hill states, Jammu Kashmir, I mean Union Territory of Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh, they are also going for online building permission system, and TCPO, Town and City Planning Organization, along with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and NIUA, we are guiding the state governments to migrate to totally online building permission system. And that will also give an opportunity to streamline the data, like how many plans approved, like how much time it has taken to get the approvals, how much time it has taken to give all the NOCs, and so much of information is going to get, I mean, collated.
I mean, that's very heartening to know that you given it such important this thing that we are looking at all the cities first to have a plan, so to say, a master plan, and then have a more online and digitalize the whole process as far as possible. And COVID has shown us the way that in very little time, how much we can change, adopt, and improve, so to say. So hopefully we would take these learnings to our city planning process as well. I am almost out of time for this panel discussion, but very quickly to Mr. Hans Peter. I think everybody, I'm there in this development sector for so long. And one thing that we keep hearing from every quarter is the private investment. Now, climate change, so to say, is somehow we want private sector to be equally participated in the process and bring in the money in and the funds to support the government. Now, it's how do we see it becoming from a rhetoric to one where it starts actually happening on its own. In the project itself, we are looking at these aspects, but in your understanding, if you can just give me 2 points or 3 points on how does this private sector gets fostered, or we push it to participate more in the climate planning or climate action in the cities.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, private sector will be key, and we have seen already now we have some monies coming in, and when counting it as it stays now, the energy sector, which is per se a commercially viable sector, there you have a lot, 80% is in the energy sector, and therefore you have a high percentage of private sector engagement already. But this apart, when tapping on the resources also for other investments than the power sector, then we need to think more creatively. One approach is to bundle green investable projects, to bundle similar projects together to achieve a critical size so that it gets attraction for the bigger financial institutions. They would like to have sizable investments, and the better you structure these bundles, the better it is to get private sector engagement. And on the other hand, it allows you to start an attractive competition among the different interested parties. So because then it gets attention from the private sector. Another key element we have to understand for the private sector is also that we try to find additional financing sources, additional revenues for the different projects. One might be, whenever possible, in trying to incorporate carbon finance. That allows better, let's say, first of all, a better positioning of the project, and then an additional income to be created. Then another often missed opportunity is we have to involve local partners. Local partners being involved in these projects are the best seal for projects, because it shows that these partners have taken, they know the area, they are engaged, and they take their own risks. And that's the best, let's say, example for others to follow. But obviously there are other elements, creditworthiness of cities. If the cities are not creditworthy by themselves, they should have enhancements by, let's say, be it the state government or the national government. And a major element is definitely also the lack of a pipeline of investable projects. And when you start creating as a city your pipeline with investable projects, which then can again dock on bundling maybe with other projects, again, this would contribute a lot to attract the interest of the private sector. Just a last sentence here, as I mentioned before, there is enough interest and enough money in the hands of the private sector. It's about how to present the investment opportunities and how to contribute to risk mitigation of these investment opportunities.
Thank you. I think in your statement, in your remarks, you've captured the question quite well. And you've given us really concrete and very pragmatic response to this. I'm not going to take any more time, but thank you, panelists. for a very, very insightful discussion. And your opinions have been, and your perspectives based on your experience have been very, very useful. With that, I'll close this panel. Thank you, all of you. And we'll move on to the second panel. But before that, I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi, for moderating this. And I just also want to thank Mr. Kunal Kumar, Mr. Srinivas, and Mr. Hans Peter for taking this up. We have a few more questions, but maybe we will come back at the end of the session to ask. Maybe even Mr. Srinivas wants to answer them. Now for our second panel, I'm so happy that Mr. Hitesh Vaidya has joined us. He's the director NIUA. Mr. Hitesh, you... Yeah, okay. Yeah. And we also have Mr. Udit Agarwal and Mr. Kumar Chaudhary and Ms. Soumya for us. All of them have been introduced. Hitesh ji, I request you to please add like what NIUA is taking up, how NIUA is taking up, like what Mr. Kunal Kumar has said in your position as the leading think tank in India, who is spreading the word like climate smart cities also. So I request you to please take over this floor and give your opening remarks, and I request you to take over for the panel also. Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak here and to moderate this panel. Thank you, Imani Kumarji, and thank you, everyone. So before I start introducing, I'll make a quick remarks. As you have asked me a question, how is the think tank is doing? I will say, right now I have just joined a year back as a director of National Institute of Urban Affairs. Out of 1 year, 6 months have been in the COVID. And so, I'm still trying to understand how the thinking and tanking can be bridged and taken forward. But whatever, with my experience within the urban sector, I just say that, and whatever I heard from the previous panel, we saw what happened in the COVID. We saw how, people started talking about clean air. We also about looking at Himalayas from the Delhi. We talked about clean rivers. We talked about sanitation of cities because cities were operating. And this panel is talking about local actions. And I must say that we all should, whatever we have have been as harsh as possible on towards our city administrators or city governance. But in the during this pandemic, the way the cities work, I think we all should give a big clap to our city administrators and city leaders, because cities worked. Whatever governance framework we can challenge, we can question, we can deliberate, but cities operated. And that's why we are sitting and having this conference after 8 months of pandemic. Is, I think, all credit goes to the city leaders who are there in this panel also. So I think we must salute them, first of all, that cities never stopped in India. Cities were sanitized. And I think one of the biggest learning from this whole thing is how we harnessed the challenges from harness data and technology to really respond, not only respond, but also to give the, also to give the better facility to the citizens, and as well as move towards the recovery process. So I think first of all, that's thing. As a think tank, we have 5 things to do. And what is think tanks? My idea is that a lot of local actions which happened during the COVID time or prior, the role of think tank is, as a country's national think tank, is to, my constituency is not 1 or 2 local bodies. My constituency is 4,400 local bodies in the country. So as a think tank, my role is to standardize the frameworks which others can replicate. So I will take up all the work which is happening and take it to a scale. So that's the role of one. Second is give a tools and instruments from these actions which can be developed, which other cities can replicate. So that's what we are doing. Third area which we are working right now is, and somebody talked about how do you want to share experiences. So we are creating this 2 knowledge portals. One is called SmartNet, where all these actions which are happening are being shared with all other cities, so they don't have to start from the scratch, but they can just replicate or learn from the other experiences and start taking actions. And then other is how to build capacities. We just launched National Urban Learning Platform. The whole motto is capacity at the go. So people who want to learn more what has happened, they can come on this National Urban Learning Platform, build their own capacities, and it's a tool to really bridge the capacity and knowledge gap of the within the cities. And fifth is we are also working with the partners like ICLE and others and trying to create a climate alliance within the country. Idea is that there are so many multilateral, bilateral training institutes which are working together, and we are instead of duplicating the whole exercise again and again, can we bring all of them together at one place and see what are there, so those frameworks can be much more stronger and strengthened. So that's the fourth exercise. And fifth, as I started, my starting point was that we ourselves are very harsh on our cities. So we don't have a story of our cities. We are doing so much of work, and I think we will hear from our panel, learner panels who are actually, soiling their hands in the ground, and they have done these local climate actions at the local level, and we will talk, listen to them shortly. And so we need to build these stories and start sharing within our other cities. We need to start positioning India urban story to the global, because the scale and complexity under which India is operating, and India is keeping the head high. I think no other country in the Western and European has that much of thing. So I think let's start celebrating our own cities. So these are the 5 areas. It has to be done with the cities. And unless we start in talking about cities, and cities become the self-sufficient, the 5 trillion economy will not happen. So how do you integrate climate within this economic development? It is more economically vibrant, talking about issues and actions at the city level to be really contributing to the big vision of self-sufficient or self-sustainable India. So I think if these are the things, if we start working as a think tank and taking these big visions into a reality and dissecting them at the city level, and that's the role as the National Institute of Urban Affairs we would like to play, and we are trying to play. And we have done 3 things. Before I close, I'll just say we have started a Center for Climate Change Center for Cities, which is the main idea is to work out those normative role in that, as well as do action research. We are doing right now climate assessment framework for 139 cities. Idea is to benchmark what are actions they are taking, how they are climate resilient, climate oriented, and how to mainstream climate within the city planning process. So that's the big area we are doing. Second area we are working on is Center for Digital Governance. There are so many digital initiatives which are happening, how they can be really harnessed to make a evidence-based decision making, which we saw happened in the during the COVID time, how we can really scale up to the national level and focus on evidence-based planning. So these are the areas where we are thinking. Before I'll stop it here, because I think more than we have a great lineup of speakers here, and I will ask one by one speakers to make their interventions and talk about how they have engaged and encouraged your cities and pursued the climate resilient development within their cities. So I will start with Mr. Udit Agarwal, who is an IAS officer of 2 and 8 batch, and currently serving as a municipal commissioner for Rajkot, and also chairman of the Rajkot Smart City Development Limited. Mr. Agarwal, it is over to you for talking about how the local action at the Rajkot city you have taken during the COVID, and how you are mainstreaming climate within the city planning process. Over to you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Mr. Vaidya, and a very good evening to all the esteemed dignitaries and panelists here. At the onset, I would like to thank Mr. Vaidya for acknowledging that during COVID, despite COVID, I would say that we were able to keep the cities running. It was not easy. Though sanitation-wise, it was easier because we were not out in the city because of the lockdown. Other things, providing other services, not easy. I'd also like to thank the organizations like CapaCITIES and Government of India to nudge us and keep nudging us back towards our sensitivity commitments towards the climate. For example, I would just like to say that today itself, for the first time ever in the Rajkot Municipal Corporation, we declared that one day will be earmarked when we use non-vehicles to come to the city, to come to work. And we had about 250 employees who cycled down to their offices, and everybody was very happy. Our employees were very happy, the city as a whole was very happy, the media was very happy, because we were giving them something which was different than COVID. So they were able to rejoice and celebrate without fossil fuels. A little about Rajkot. Rajkot is the 4th largest city in Gujarat. As per Oxford Economics, endorsed by the World Economic Forum, it is the 7th growing city of the world. Climate-wise, it falls in the arid climatic. Traditionally, Rajkot is a city which has had issues with water, especially drinking water. And there were times in the past when water was transported in containers in railways, and water was brought to the city, wherein to people. And luckily, today that situation is not more, and we are very self-sufficient when it comes to drinking water. So I would like to take you through interventions which have been brought in the past in were our commitments, building a more climate resilient city. And all these, most of these interventions by my predecessors. And for example, they're on the screen: the Solar City Mission, the Urban Project, the Low Carbon Mobility Plan, the Urban Low Emission Development Strategies. They were all introduced in the past for Rajkot City. However, the focus of all these interventions was primarily the mitigation strategies of mitigating the greenhouse gases and things which were to be done for that. Paradigm shift came in the 60s under the CapaCITIES, in which the focus shifted not just towards mitigation, but also towards the adaptation strategies which the city undertook. By adaptation strategies, I would primarily mean measures incorporated along with the greenhouse gas inventory which was being made. And what we came up with was a climate resiliency action plan. And the best part was that this action plan was not a plan on paper. Rather, it was made a part of the very ideology of Rajkot Municipal Corporation by passing a resolution in the general board of the corporation in the month of 2018, thus showing the city that we were committed towards creating a green city, a green city. And I think the culmination and the result is that in the year 2020, we have got many awards in this category. We have won the National One Planet City Challenge. In addition to that, by the Ministry of Urban Affairs, we have been accorded the most self-sustainable city in the big city category, which I think is a great achievement, and we are very helpful to all the organizations who have helped us in achieving this. The crux of the Climate Resilient City Action Plan is that over a period of 5 years, we intend to bring down the greenhouse gases by 14%. And that is what we have been working towards. Next slide, please. Okay. So 2015-16 was taken as the baseline for inventorizing our greenhouse gases, and on that basis, we were able to bring down introduce interventions in two ways. First, we realized that after sectoral analysis, so the maximum GHG emissions were happening in the residential sector, be it the residents or the projects are made by the corporate, or be it residents in the private sector. For that, interventions were brought in and adopted many, I would say, fuels like, and we went towards non-conventional energy resources like solar panels installed on our housing projects, which were in the city, in which houses were given to the people economically weaker sections. The second insight that came to us that in the UV services, the services the local body was giving, so the maximum GHG emission was happening in the water sector. So we try to find that what we done to reduce the fuel or the energy consumption in the water sector, and it was found out that there were a lot of our water pumps which were using a lot of energy, and they were not any energy efficient. And so all the water pumps, because mainly the water was being pumped, and rather than the gravity, it was the pumping was being mainly used for providing water. So all the pumps which were working at an efficiency of less than 70% changed in the city. And into that, then the vulnerability hotspots were created. We have 18 zones, 18 wards in the city, and a zonation of all these wards was done based on health parameters, drinking water, sewerage, rainwater, solid management, and urban mobility, and that zonation forms a basic part of our any kind of planning and decision making. Next, please.
Agarwala, if you can be little faster, because we have to manage time. My apologies.
I just have to change the slide for me, please. Yes.
Yeah.
So these are again pictures of the interventions that were brought in. We have done a green cover survey of the city, and interventions of afforestation, create urban forest is being carried out. Pumps were changed, as you can see. We have introduced cycling, walkability, major part of not just recreation but also commuting and transportation in the city. Also, we have recently ordered 50 e-buses, and make sure that 100 more are going to be ordered. By this, we will be converting the entire fleet of our buses into e-buses, and we think that by this we'll be able to achieve our commitments toward creating more climate resilient city. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think great initiatives which you have taken. I just one question which I can ask, which has come from a participant, and he's saying, are you really also consider informal settlements while you are preparing a climate action plan? If you can quickly respond to that.
Definitely, we do consider the informal settlements. Fortunately, the informal settlements in our city have been decreasing over a period of. We have been under housing sector. We have been allocating them. We have been rehabilitating them to better areas, and the PPP, the public-private partnership in housing, has really hit off in the city of Rajkot. We have done some award-winning projects in the city, and but we do plan for short-term interventions. That time we do consider the informal settlements. Whereas whenever we're thinking of the long-term planning, obviously we have to first focus on rehabilitating, and the informal settlements have to be converted into formal settlements.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, sir. Now we have our next panelist again. We have Mr. Kumar Chaudhary, who is again IAS officer from 2014 batch, and is serving as a municipal commissioner from Udaipur, and he's also a CEO of a smart city Udaipur, and Udaipur has also done excellent work on mainstreaming climate action, because it also typically a lake city, so it has a different challenges than the city of Rajkot. So I'll hand over to Mr. Kumar Chaudhary for his intervention, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank Swiss Development Corporation and CapaCITIES team for this opportunity. I think you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Hello.
Sir. We can hear you. Sir.
Secondly, I'm highly thankful to the ICLE team, which is working in Udaipur, for helping us and making us sensitive about this topic time and again, and working with us continuously for climate change. Next slide, please. Can you shift? Yeah. First I will just put a light on the climate change journey of the city. The city was, the city started being sensitive from the year 1976 itself. Because at that point of time, the sewerage was, the sewage system was not there, and all the septage and sewage was going into the lakes, as Udaipur is well known for its lakes. So it was going into the lakes. From that time itself, the people became sensitive, and they were very much careful, and they were like, we should save our city and save our lakes. So if you see, Udaipur is one of the few city who has very clean lakes, and it is a very green city. So right from 1976, we have a project, a small project at that point of time for intercepting the sewage. After that time, and again, there were projects from the central and state government. And from year 2008, we started focusing on these issues. So after 2008, in year 2014-15, from central government, we had projects of Amrut, Smart Cities, RUIDP from state government, where we focused on 2-3 things. One was covering the sewerage system of the city, making STPs, just tapping all the sewage water. Apart from that, we also focused on the solid waste management. Apart from that, we focused on legacy waste management. So can I have my presentation again? Yeah. This was something which we were doing continuously. Can I have the presentation, please? So I'll just keep on ruling. So what we focused on was like whole of the city right now. If you see, the city is undergoing many sewerage projects, and we are working on the STPs. And I'm happy to inform that our sewerage treating capacity is equivalent to our generation capacity at present. We are also managing the waste door-to-door collection, and at source segregation, we with the help of ICLE South Asia, we have a biomethanation plant in place, 2 TPD. We are in process of creating another 20 TPD plant. So apart from that, we have made one 30 TPD MRF facility. We are making another 60 TPD MRF facility. We have a compost plant of 50 TPD facility, and we are further increasing the compost generation. Next slide, please. Apart from this, we are on the financing part. What we are working, we have worked with the private partners like Hindustan Zinc, and we are taking their help in making STPs, making fecal sludge treatment plants, and we are also taking help of many NGOs like ICLE, who has helped us in making biomethanation plant and other pilots. So these are something which city is doing quite regularly. We have further made smart roads in which we have kept a very huge green cover, and we have done proper planning. We are working on PBS. We are working on e-mobility, which will further reduce the greenhouse gases, and we will be having a proper public transport system in place by start of November. We have worked on the junction improvement so that traffic flow is smooth and gas emissions can be reduced. We have further worked on the LED street lights. We have worked on rooftop solar. We have almost taken all the government buildings for rooftop solar systems on them. Now we are working with the university, we are working with other organizations which have proper roof cover, and we are working on an off-site solar system also. We have also placed, as we have lakes, we have also placed air control measurement system and water quality control systems in place. Next slide, please. As far as climate action policies are concerned, we have climate resilient city action plan of Udaipur in place. We have action plan for the National Clean Air Program in place. We are developing a low carbon IPT action plan for Udaipur. We are also working on non-motorized transport for Udaipur, and we are very much working on the stakeholder and community level engagement, because if this is not strong, we will not be successful. That we have learned from our experience. If city adopts it, if the people of the city adopt it, then only it can be successful. And we are working on the private partnership from the business heads of the city who can come ahead and who can engage themselves in such type of projects. We have a biodiversity committee in place. We have, as far as building permissions are concerned, we have a green building code in place, and which has been done at the city level. And we are working on the roof water conservation system, for which municipal corporation takes a reserve amount during while we give the building permission. And when the person sets the water conservation system, he can take that money from us back. So this is how we are working on this. Udaipur as such is very much sensitive. We have a Ayad river project, and this river is not in good shape right now, but we are working on how to rejuvenate this river and how to make it as a riverfront. So that project has also been taken up by Udaipur city. We are very much sensitive, and as far as Udaipur is concerned, it is in the mid of Aravallis. It has a green cover, it has lakes, it has water. The only thing we have to do is we have to be responsible and we have to conserve. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think it was excellent, initiatives. As I was telling, that cities are doing a lot of things. It's just that we are to tell to nation at large, and I think that we should really not look at our cities from the angle, but the cities should be looked at from the complexities and the scale-up exercise which they are doing. I think this is a great way forward. Before I move forward, I just have a small thing. You talked about engagement with the private sector, sir, and that has been the biggest challenge cities have faced. And how do you see this relationship or this work and collaboration with the private sector at the national level or state level should be nurtured so that cities get more leeway to engage with the private sector?
I think this is the requirement of the moment. We can't move ahead without this. If we take proper projects and proper plans we discuss with the private sector, and if we engage with the businessman of the city who understands that this is important for him, his family, his generations to come, his city, they come forward to help us. And many regulations and many laws just bind them to commit few things to the local government or to the state government or the central government. If we work on the permissions we give them, if we work on the modalities we share with them when they start the project, I think we can we can discuss with them that these are the conditions you have to fulfill. And if you fulfill these conditions in the city, it will be helpful for the city and for you also. And you can project this project for like in other cities also as a CSR project or as a company responsibility project. In our case, we were successful in engaging with 3 or 4 companies, and we are further working. Like we have this cycling project, and we are working with many companies who are coming ahead, many schools who are coming ahead for helping us in like cycle parking, cycle lanes, cycle stands, and lot many things. My opinion is we need to project it properly.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll quickly hand over to Soumya Vidula for she's an expert working with ICLEI, and she has been working across the cities in the country on mainstreaming climate action. And I know her much more from my previous avatar as a country representative of UN Habitat, where she was also looking at horizontal and vertical linkages within the governance framework, which really help or deter in mainstreaming the climate action at the local level. So I'll ask Soumya to give her experiences quickly on how challenges or what are the ways, good practices one can learn from each other and take the mainstreaming climate action in much expeditiously and effective way.
Thank you, Mr.
Soumya, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaidya, for this. Very quickly, I think in terms of the work that we're doing with the cities over the last 11, 12 years, we have seen a climate, and there is now increased understanding of the need to mainstream climate considerations into regular city planning and implementation. So previously, maybe about 10 years ago, the focus was on looking at climate as a separate project, as an ad hoc project, something that needed to be done because ICLEI is saying it needed to be done. But today, thanks to the work that the NIUA agencies like NIUA and the vision of like Mr. Kunal Kumar and also the recognition on ground that unless we address climate and unless we mainstream these climate considerations, it is not going to work for us, for the citizenry and for the city authorities. And therefore, through the CapaCITIES project, we had come up with an integrated planning process where we are with the city and working with the city. We had come up with a process which could be integrated into the regular planning and the regular implementation that the city was doing, as alluded to by Mr. Udit Agarwal, and also like Mr. Kumar Chaudhary had said, these climate action plans are not standalone documents and don't sit there on the shelf, but the municipal budgets, when the budgetary process is happening, these are looked into, and when there are the large-scale infrastructure projects that are being done, the climate considerations are actively interwoven into the actual implementation. We are also heartened by the fact that if there are certain success stories, for example, the biomethanation facilities in Udaipur, or the work that Rajkot has done with social housing and renewable energy, there is a lot of interest from within the country, from the cities within the country, to actually come and view and observe and replicate it. So there has been an active ask from the state governments also to look at it from a state government perspective, so that the lessons from Rajkot or the lessons from Udaipur can be taken up at the state government level, and that is what the CapaCITIES project is trying to do in phase 2. So I'll stop here, and the good stories that we are hearing from the commissioners and from the city leaders are stand testament to what I have been saying. So thank you, Mr. Hitesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya. I think that was a great perspective, and from ICLEI's point of view and from the sector point of view, and I think it will go a long way. We are also now joined by Mr. Reto Delti, a Swiss expert who has worked with several cities in Europe, supporting and guiding the adoption of similar initiatives in Europe called the European Energy Award, and has also for last 3 years worked with the Indian cities to strengthen the planning and governance of such processes. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Delty to give his views and his experiences from European as well as Indian cities, and what are the main challenges in the European context and in Indian context to mainstream climate action. Over to you, Mr. Delty, please. We can't hear you, Soumya.
Soumya, you are muted, Soumya.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Soumya.
Sorry, Mr. Vaidya. Unfortunately, Mr. Detley could not make it to the session right now. He had emergency and could not be here at this moment. But we'll be happy to hear from Mr. Mahesh Morane, the CEO of the Nagpur Smart Cities Limited.
He is also not.
He's also not there today.
He's not here as well. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just pick up a couple of questions which has come from the audience for the panelists. And one question to Mr. Udit Agarwal. Sir, one is, what are the key factors that encouraged you and your city to pursue climate resilient development? Mr. Udit Agarwal, please.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that question, because it was not very clear. I think there are some...
The question is, what are the key factors that encourage you and your city to pursue climate resilient development within your city?
I think the first, primary and the foremost is that sustainable development is something that we all are aware of. And I think the consciousness towards it has grown over the years, not just in the think tanks, not just amongst academicians or government, but even amongst people of the city, of the rural areas. With education, sustainable development is also something which is becoming paramount in everybody's decision making and lifestyle, I would say. So one, that. Secondly, I think a question did come across that what can how it can be made more responsive towards building climate resilient cities. In that ways, I think we have to understand that what drives every category of people. I believe, yes, primarily what drives the private sector is demand for their products, competitive market, profit making. So if we can somehow make it profitable for them, if we can create demand for their products which are more climate resilient, which are green, which are eco-friendly, that is something which we have to look towards. If I talk of my own city, Rajkot city, people are demanding for more green cover. People are for non-conventional energy sources. As I would again say, today was an eye-opener for me when I saw the response that we got in the city when half of my corporation took cycles to their office. We saw people in the private sector which joined us. I had this pouring in which private cycles sellers, they are coming up and saying that we will give discounts and subsidies to people who will buy cycles. So I think that in general, there is a consciousness amongst people that sustainable development is the way ahead. Also, I think creating a green environment is something that everybody wants because it just is a better way of living. We have recently come up with a 47-acre urban forest, which we are developing in the city. And that has been taken up very well by people. People want greener pastures to go to greener pastures in literal terms. They want to get away from the city towards a more green area, especially because Rajkot happens to be a semi-arid climatic zone. So coming back to your question, I think there has to be something in it for everybody, and that education is also bringing about this change in people. People in the current world of ICT, I think people are seeing across the world, people are seeing everywhere what eating away our resources, natural resources for the future generation can cause. I think COVID the pandemic has been a major eye-opener. A lot of people, now it is open. Everybody knows that people with a strong immunity, people with a good cardiorespiratory system have been able to fight this pandemic, have been able to fight this infection better. So that is also a big eye-opener for a lot of people. Now people are moving towards more lifestyle changes. And I believe this will big way in that bringing about that change as well, where people are becoming more conscious towards preserving the climate and preserving Mother Nature. I'll rest there.
Thank you, sir. I think it was great. I think you have related it to the real situation, and I think it answers the question which has come. The second question I want, and we all saw that during the pandemic, that it emphasized the neighborhood planning. It emphasized that the action has to be at the local level. Action has to be at my doorstep. So the question which has come from one of the participants is, how do you look at the micro political framework conditions? Do you feel the relevance of city planning is recognized within our system? And how is it related with the investment decisions within city? So I'll ask Mr. Kumar Chaudhary if he can respond to that.
Yeah, definitely. As far as micro policies are concerned, I'll just state this example. We are just sharing these examples with you, with all the participants across the world. So they are going through what Rajkot and Udaipur has done, micro planning. So based on these projects which we have already taken, I remember last year there was a project of European Union in which they were asking that if a city has already taken up a climate project, if they are halfway, they were ready to, the European Union was ready to invest for the rest of the project. Apart from EU, there are many agencies which actually look into what cities have done, what states have done, and do they have a policy framework? Are they serious about it? So this micro planning, which you devise for your city, this works as a you can say presentation or projection for your city, and it acts as a face value. It will act at the local level, it will act at the national level, and it will act internationally also. So it is very much required, and it is very much relevant to make these policies at the local level. And if you don't have a policy of the state or at national level, you can, of course, you are a local body and you can make your own policy. And if you are sensitive, many factories, many industries will come in future who will be sensitive to this particular thing. And many factories, many industries have this criteria that we will be investing in such cities which are like climate friendly, which are green cities. So your overall industrial investment can help. Yes, some will go because they will not be actually interested in, or they will not be more sensitive towards climate, but many you will get who will be sensitive. So this is very much required. Yeah.
Great, thank you, sir. And I'm also mindful of the time, and I think this was a great exchange of ideas and great exchange of experiences actually from the ground. And I think it also emphasizes the point which I was laying, don't be too harsh on our cities. They are really, really championing with the complexities and the scalability which is required in India. Still we are managing, still we are running. I think there is a huge hope, and if we have a leadership who is, thinking leadership at the city level, we have a huge hope for urban transformation, which has been envisaged within our policy framework or with a vision which has been laid down by government to take forward. So I thank all the panelists on behalf of National Institute of Urban Affairs, on behalf of ICLE, and thank you very much for coming on board and sharing your thoughts and giving us a new way of thinking and making that storyline that cities are working and cities are relevant and cities are taking climate action to mainstream climate and are conscious that of the climate challenges which we are going to face in the future. And we need to work collectively, collaboratively, and new innovative ideas to take forward. So with that, thank you everyone. And I close this panel and hand over to Imani Kumarji for his closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hitesh, and thanks a lot to both the commissioners. I think that's great. You have the on-ground experience that is more important at this time, and I just Srinivasji for bringing together the planning aspects into the climate resilience. Thank you, sir. I know that we could not answer most of the questions on Q&A, but we will take those questions back to the panelists, and we will come back with answers to all the questions who has given us on this webinar. I just want to thank each and every one of you, Mr. Jonathan, Ms. Sakshi, Hans-Peter, Srinivas, Kunal Kumar sir, and both the commissioners from Udaipur and Rajkot, and Mr. Hitesh Vaidya. I know that you have a lot of busy schedule, but you also joined us for this webinar on that. So on behalf of ICLEI South Asia and ICLEI internationally, on the Daring Cities team, we just want to thank each and every one of you. Also, all the panelists, I saw that there are more than 90 panelists, 90 participants in the participants list when the session started. Right now, there are more than 60 odd still there. Thank you all for joining us for this session, which very much interesting with ground experiences. And we will come back to you with more information on that. As said that Daring Cities is going to continue for the next 2 weeks. We have sessions next week, and also next week on 28th, we are closing down from the Daring Cities side on that. Thank you again, once again for all of you, and we will close this session from this time. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All